You're entering Corsi Nation.
This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today it's Friday. It's November 7th, 2025. Our main story today continues to be New York City and the fact that we now have a Muslim radical Marxist mayor, Mamdani, who I believe the election was stolen. I believe the mail-in ballots were the key, and we're not going to find out anything about this because the Democrats control the process. They're not going to fess up to the fact that they stole an election. Far be it the Democrats would tell the truth. So Mamdani yesterday now has the big celebration in New York City because he's going to be the mayor. And so out come all the Muslims, and they're all celebrating that now New York City is a Muslim city. And so therefore we've got London and we've got New York in the hands of Muslims leadership, mayors. And that's just a big celebration. Okay, so a huge crowd of Muslims gathered in New York to claim the city for Islam. And I guess we could play a little bit of this, but it's a matter of, if the city's proclaimed for Islam, well, then, we're going to change. It's fundamental change of the culture of New York City. New York City was always a city where people worked, where people were there to achieve. It's a great city in terms of the buildings, in terms of the culture, the economic activity. But there's, the acceptance speech of Mamdani, which should send chills up and down the spines of every freedom-loving Americans. Even Scott Jennings is saying that. And Mamdani says, "We will prove there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about." Great. So we're just now going to trust government. Government's going to solve all of our problems because nobody works. Muslims don't work. And I think I want to play this one little clip here from X. Mamdani. I'm going to give it to you here, Chris, in a second. But I want you to hear what this guy really says. And because this is not just benign, forget about it. It's just a drop in the bucket. This guy is fundamentally a Marxist, and he's fundamentally anti-American. And so, Chris, I'm going to give it to you here in the
Sure. Give that to me. And do you want to have I have the one here where he quotes Eugene V. Debs.
Yeah, let's hear that.
Times, by the way.
Debs went to prison in the World War I era for giving a speech in Canton, Ohio, in which he opposed World War I.
I think he was
a labor leader. Yeah.
I think he was thrown in jail because he threatened the political legitimacy of a Democrat candidate. So Democrats keep throwing people.
Well, no, he gave a speech in Canton, Ohio, in which he said that war was brutal and he couldn't stand the idea of steel being, bayoneted through somebody's body, et cetera, et cetera. And that was considered under the Espionage Acts to have been a subversive speech. They put Eugene Debs in jail. He ran for president from jail and got 1 million votes. So let's hear Mamdani. This is his acceptance speech. Let's hear him for a few minutes.
The sun may have set over our city this evening, but as Eugene Debs once said, I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity.
Debs was a labor leader who was also pretty much of a communist and early communist, and wanted people he was really a labor union leader. But again, it was in the era when labor unions were very much radicalized and were very likely to be communist at some point or other. Now let's play this one from Mamdani. Okay, this is another interesting clip. Go ahead. Looks like he's half asleep.
The way the prisons are set up in our society, I would argue that they do not work. They do not make us safer. The instinct is to just take that person, the source of that harm, the source of that issue, and then just throw them away. Put them in a cage and throw away the key. And that doesn't address the reason why that harm was created in the first place. A lot of times, people who create trauma for others are those who themselves went through trauma earlier in their own lives.
Right.
And I bring all of this up to say that Again, like when we talk about policing, I don't think the system actually makes us safer. I think what it does is it just removes problems out of view.
Okay, so the criminals are the victims. The criminals have been abused, and so therefore they're criminals. And what we need to do is understand them and reason with them and rehabilitate them, but we can't remove them. And the police are an agent of social control whose job is to oppress minorities. Okay, that's where Mamdani's going. Now, the guy with these ideas and the Muslim culture, which is not the most productive culture of the face of the earth, it is not going to be a safer city. New York is not going to be safer. It's going to be less safe. It's going to be more expensive because, again, the number of people who are working are going to be declining. And it's just going to get more expensive all the time. It's already outrageously expensive, New York. And it's increasingly difficult to live there, which means that New York will be inhabited by people who really can't afford it and are just taking over the city and demanding that they can live rent-free and all kinds of other things we're about to hear about. And the Muslim culture, men don't work very much at all. It's a brutal culture for women, and a lot of children, a lot of babies. But it's not productive. It's not going to be the thriving city of New York. It's going to be a declining city of New York, which, like all of the Democratic-run cities, is going to get increasingly crime-filled and dangerous. Stabbings, random violence, police unable to respond, just simply not enough police to handle the issues. Citizens left unprotected. People are going to abandon New York, and businesses are going to abandon New York, and New York will get the same pattern we see on the West Coast of homelessness, filth in the cities, the streets, drugs all over the place. Any retail establishment of any value prone to these blitz mobs that come in and just steal everything. And what's Mamdani going to do about it? Nothing. Because the point of this is to destroy New York. The point of this is to destroy America. Now, I want to go to there's Zero Hedge today has a post on Bezmenov. And I think this is appropriate because, again, Bezmenov was a communist. I read about him in my book. I'm going to pull that up in just a minute, but I want to get the Zero Hedge up here because they do summarize it very nicely. And I want to read a little bit from my book so you can see, I've been onto this for quite some time. My book was published in 2023. And this article is 20 insights from Yuri Bezmenov. Okay, now if I pull up my book here, and let me see if I've got it on this version here. Hold on a second. I may have to. Yeah, here we go. It's on page 90. Hold on, I'll get my book. Here we go. Here's the book. And the book is, as I'll show you the cover. Here we go. The book is the Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. And on page 90, I start writing about Bezmenov because he's very critical to the whole evolution of communist thinking. Bezmenov was a communist. In 1939, he grew up in Stalinist Russia during World War II. His father was an officer of the General Staff of the Soviet Army, responsible for the inspection of Soviet military forces stationed in foreign soil in places like Mongolia, Cuba, and various Eastern European countries. When he was 17, Bezmenov entered the Institute of Oriental Languages, a part of Moscow State University under the KGB's direction. In 1963, spent 2 years in India working as a public relations officer for Soviet refineries constructions. In 1965, he was called back to Moscow. He began working as a Soviet journalist for RIA Novosti, Novosti, a Russian state-owned news agency. In 1970, he defected to the West through Canada. In 1984, he published a book, Love Letter to America, under the pen name of Thomas David Schumann. And he identified 4 stages of the ways in which the KGB had architected to destroy a country like America. And the first stage involves demoralization. So it takes about 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many or few? It says it's the minimum number of years to educate, quote, one generation of students in a target country, America, for example, and expose them to the ideology of the subverter, in other words, communism. So it takes 10 to 15 to 20 years, 15 to 20, the minimum number of years to educate one generation of students into Marxist-Leninist ideology, which is pumped into at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged, which happens through the universities. Okay, so dropout or half-baked intellectuals are now occupying positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, and educational system. You're stuck with them. You cannot change their mind even if you expose them to authentic information. Okay, that's what's going on. They believe in climate change, all kinds of other crazy ideas, but you can't dislodge those ideas from them. So the process has many names: psychological warfare, ideological aggression, propaganda warfare. The KGB called it active measures. And it was very laid out in terms of how the methodology is to demoralize people. And the article summarizes very nicely how these points work. What the article says is that essentially you're going to attack the culture of the people. In other words, you're going to educate them to not believe in God. The schools become indoctrination centers that promote relativism over facts and critical thinking, value relativism. What do you believe? What's your gender? Who is the oppressed? Media infiltration sows confusion by amplifying divisive narratives and discrediting objective truth. Religion is attacked by portraying it as outdated or oppressive, eroding spiritual anchors and replacing them with state loyalty or nihilism. Family structures are weakened through the promotion of individualism, divorce, and alternative lifestyles that fragment social cohesion. Feminism is one of the aspects. I cover that in my book extensively. Family structures are weakened through all this promotion of all these ideas. Moral relativism blurs right and wrong, leading to apathy and the inability to unite against society's true enemies. History is rewritten to vilify national heroes and traditions, fostering self-doubt and guilt in the populace. And then following demoralization, destabilization is the next phase, and that stage 2 lasts about 2 to 5 years, which targets the economy, foreign relations, and defense to create internal chaos. And I'll read from my book. The first symptom of instability, this is Bezmenov writing, is expressed as the desire of the population to bring to power those politicians and parties who are charismatic, act like good caretakers, and promise more security, not from external and foreign enemies, but rather job security, free social services, and other pleasure strokes provided by Big Brother. By concentrating the attention of the nation on short-term solutions and improvements, such irresponsible politicians simply procrastinate on facing the moment of truth. The nation will have to pay a much higher price for the main and basic problem, bringing the community back to stability and restoring the moral crisis. Well, this sets the stage for the third phase, which is crisis. During the crisis, people willingly surrender freedoms for promised security, paving the way for authoritarian control. 9/11, continuous wars in the Middle East, October 7th attack in Israel, surrender power to the government and to protect us. So at this third stage of subversion, you'll have all your American radicals and Soviet sleeper agents springing into action, trying to seize power as quickly and as ruthlessly as possible. Thank you, Mamdani. Just, and it's happening in Great Britain. It's happening worldwide, where now these radical Muslim leaders are coming to the fore. David Horowitz warned us about this years ago, that Ayatollah Khomeini had combined radical Islam jihad with Marxism and produced a radical ideology that Bezmenov has identified here as being able to be used to bring down a strong society like the United States. Then stage 4, normalization, the target society capitulates to communism. Okay, the Russian military may even be called into the target nation to reintroduce law and order. The fourth stage assumes the new communist government has nationalized vital industries, reduced the economy's private sector to a minimum, redistributed wealth, and eliminated private property. The newly, quote, elected communist government has also engaged in a massive propaganda effort to explain and justify progressive reforms. Now, the fourth stage, a submissive population submits to totalitarian subjugation to the new world order of Marx, Lenin, and Mao. And Bezmenov elaborated on that quite eloquently. And I write, suppose there was any doubt that neo-Marxist and cultural Maoists who engage in political warfare have lost their belief in God. In that case, Bezmenov's quotations make clear that winning takes the place of morals in their secular religion, where deception and lying become standard methods to propagate and proselytize their radical left, quote, truth-telling narratives. Okay, so communists cannot win until they first destroy. I wrote this. Communists demonstrated in the 20th century that when they gain power, what follows is economic ruin, mass starvation, genocide, loss of individual freedom, and suppression of dissent. These outcomes should not be a surprise. The momentum of political movement that comes to power through deception is designed to produce demoralization, destabilization, and crisis. It does not suddenly transform into goodness and light once the insurgency succeeds. Okay, so the opposition then is silenced through censorship, marginalization, or elimination altogether in the normalization stage. This process relies on useful idiots, well-meaning Western intellectuals, elites, activists, and leaders who unwittingly advance societal suicide. Once subversion succeeds, even the exposure of the truth won't reverse it, as the population rejects facts that contradict their reprogrammed worldview. Well, we're going through Bezmenov right now process, and the outcome is going to be loss of freedom, and the outcome is going to be more radicalization of America with Mamdani's winning elections or stealing elections, because the Democrats have now gone from being a communist party to a cultural Maoist party, running a cultural revolution against the culture of capitalism, against working, against families, against God, and are now in the process of transforming society into their utopia, which means surrendering control of ideas, of your life, of your lifestyle, of your beliefs in God, of family, to a atheistic core that is fundamentally satanic and anti-human, doesn't believe you have any rights as a human being. And Chris, if you want to come on, we can comment on this, and I want to move on to a couple of other stories. But I think this is what we're seeing now in New York, celebrating that is now an Islamic city.
Yeah. I was watching videos. You have these young white women talking about how great it's going to be to see Sharia law. They're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, I mean, all these young white women who voted for Mamdani because they think he's handsome.
That's another thing. Yeah, well, yeah, sort of a greasy handsome, if you will. But I have had women tell me he's not. I've had women tell me he is. It's just a matter of taste. But this Bezmenov is absolutely correct when he observes what's going on here. Now, back in the day, it was a lot easier to push communism through force. Now it has to be done through both manipulation and force. Luckily, they have Mamdani has the media and the silver tongue to snap in those useful idiots. But did you notice? Did you notice that?
Same with didn't mean to interrupt, but same with Obama.
Right. Well, yeah, Obama was handpicked and drafted for the time he was, so that was interesting. But Mamdani, again, he supposedly came out of nowhere, but he has so much of a Hollywood moneyed rich background that I tend to believe that he was also handpicked after a while.
Obama was handpicked. There was a whole group of them that were. There was a period of time when the CIA was looking to find a black person who could become president as a charismatic,
right,
and then could mask the communism and socialism and Marxism and neo-Marxism and cultural Maoism and the sexual liberation with Freud read into Marx. So we're not repressed sexually,
right?
We're liberated.
And he portrayed himself as a moderate to those on the far left and to those in the middle. But where he did win in New York City was not the American-born citizens. If you looked at polls, if you looked at the election, or let's just say the election numbers, those who were born outside of New York City and outside of the country, if you will, those were mainly born outside of the country, voted for Mamdani. Those who were born in New York or in America, they voted for Andrew Cuomo. Many of them.
And again, if people will just read this book on neo-Marxism, you'll see how the evolution of these ideas have produced what we're experiencing today, which is the inability of our society to function along traditional values. And I want to point to another article that's on the Discern report today. And I think it's written by Michael Snyder. Usually Michael Snyder is the one who writes these kind of perceptive essays. But this is about ending the filibuster. The Senate Republicans, must come together with a preemptive strike or be obliterated with no recourse. And I believe this is Daniel Corvell, Corvell, and he's saying that Thune must end the filibuster now, because once the Democrats gain control of the Senate, they won't have, Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin holding them back. They'll remove their filibuster and begin a permanent reign of terror that would destroy the nation before the Republicans could ever gain power again. The only way to stop them is to end the filibuster, end the shutdown, and start passing legislation over the next year that prevents our nation's demise. Okay, now Trump is on this theme, and what this Corvell writes is that the modern Democratic Party has openly embraced authoritarianism cloaked in democracy, weaponizing federal agencies, censoring dissent, criminalizing opponents, and using every constitutional safeguard in their path. They're no longer a loyal opposition. They're an existential threat to the republic itself. And if they ever return to full control in Washington, there will be no guardrails left. The filibuster, that last procedural speed bump, will be gone in a heartbeat. Okay, so I've been saying this. The Democrats have now gone from being a communist party to being a treasonous, anarchistic party that wants to destroy America. And they're well set along the road to do it. And this election of Mamdani, stealing elections, the computers in New Jersey in the Republican districts just didn't happen to work. So the voters couldn't register. They sent them home. I'm sorry, we can't let you vote because voting's by computers and the computer's down. So we just have to not count your votes here in the Republican precincts in which the computers, quote unquote, malfunctioned. And what recourse is there? What repercussions do the Democrats suffer? None. Now, a related story is that President Trump is now facing the possibility that the Supreme Court might decide he does not have the power to tax. In other words, doesn't have the power to impose tariffs on foreign countries. Now, if that happens, we're going to have to repay trillions of dollars that have been imposed on these tariffs by President Trump, and it will tank the economy. We will definitely go into a very deep recession if we have to get that much more in debt in order to let other countries have an unfair advantage competing with the United States. China will rebel. China's imports are way down. China's suffering economically. If China can regain the cheap labor producing goods for America and Americans go out of work because the manufacturing is dead, it'll be great for China and the Communist Party, but it won't be so great here in the United States. And the middle class of the United States is getting squeezed to the point where it's very difficult to remain middle class. And we're faced with divorce, which is economically destructive. I can attest to that myself in my own situation. My wife of 32 years has an affair and divorces me because, so opposed to my being in politics. And I can understand doing what I do in politics has been a risky business. They wanted to put me in prison for the rest of my life. And fortunately, I managed not to get indicted. But the point is that their goal on the Mueller investigation was to make sure I was silenced and in prison today. And I'm fully aware of how close they came to achieving that goal. So I think we're at a critical point right now where we have to realize that the last hope we have is that the country can rally around Donald Trump, that the MAGA movement does succeed, and we get some handle on our internal affairs, especially starting with elections. And as we point out in God's Five Stones, and again, it's very difficult to get donations to that website. If I were now supporting revolution and Black Lives Matter, we'd have millions of dollars. Soros would be shoveling money our way. But since we're opposing socialism and communism and supporting God and family, traditional values, the goal is to make sure that we're starved and, if not imprisoned, certainly silenced, because no one is reading us, given the shadow banning I'm still experiencing. Okay, so this is a critical point right now. And in the next few weeks and months, we're going to find out if we do get the executive order from Donald Trump, which is promised. He's promising it this week, saying that we will get an executive order that will demand voter ID, proof of citizenship to vote, and will end the universal mail-in ballot, which is the Democrats' key way of cheating and winning elections. No more machines, so the votes can't be switched, or everything done by paper. So if you want to vote, the paper's right there, you can vote. I think we're at a critical turning point, and I'm following it very closely and making sure the Corsi Nation, you're following it along with us. Now, gold today is at $4,031 an ounce, and silver at $48.91 an ounce. And I'm imploring you to read this book that I've written. Just get a free copy. Chris will show you how to do it. It's on the website on CorsiNation.com, the tab at the top that says gold. You can get the Walking Liberty $50 offer, where you can buy 250 of these coins that are just about 100% silver as a lost leader to Swiss America for what the cost is what they're worth basically in silver. At least you'll have some metal that will appreciate in value. And silver, given how much cheaper it is than gold, is a way to accumulate precious metals without having to spend a fortune. Fill out the form on the website, CorsiNation.com, and Swiss America will contact you. Then you can get the free book as well. The free book, I think, is well worth reading. It's a short read, but it's a very important read about what's happening economically as the United States is losing our central position in global trade. Call 1-800-519-6268. Write it down. 1-800-519-6268 to get a copy of this book on how the coming global crash will create an historic gold rush. And we're also seeing over on Zero Hedge stories today that Germany is in the process of going through an economic meltdown, which was completely predictable. I've been talking about this now for over a year. Germany just last month was destroying its last nuclear power plant. And what that means is that Germany is deindustrializing. And Germany was the economic powerhouse of the European Union. If Germany deindustrializes, what you're going to have is you're going to have a recession sweep the EU at a time when EU borrowing and EU debt is at all-time records highs. Okay, so the whole idea that Germany's industrial heart is stalling, and largely because of this green tech illusion, this net zero, where Germany's going for more expensive energy, which makes the German economy not competitive. Okay, so if you get like a 5% drop in production in Germany, that's going to cost a lot more in terms of percentage of jobs that are lost. With AI coming on, jobs being lost to AI, and now the economic malaise in Europe, the EU, we're seeing that gold is going to hit. I think gold will be next year between $5,000 and $6,000 an ounce, and where it is today at $4,000 an ounce is going to look cheap. Chris, I want you to come on. I want to conclude with one or two more stories, but I think the economic crisis which is building is something that people need to be aware of today. Because if you're aware of it at the early stages, you have the best chance of getting out and avoid destruction.
Exactly. And you mentioned what's going on in Germany right now. They've been falling downhill for a very long time. Apparently, the Chancellor Fred Merz here isn't doing his job well enough.
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult to do any kind of job in Germany when the country's deindustrializing.
That's right.
Okay, now the other point I want to make is that Russia is about to capture this key stronghold in the Donbass region, which is part of these two eastern provinces that are largely Russian-speaking. Now, if Russia gets that province, the question is going to be whether that satisfies Putin and whether he quits or not. But Putin has been bragging about advanced weaponry, and he's been suggesting he won't quit fighting until he's conceded the Donbass. The Donbass is a very industrial area of Ukraine, and it's very, very highly valuable economically. It's been fought over for centuries between Russia and Germany and all the other countries that have coveted Ukraine. One of the key parts is this Donbass region. What I think is going to happen here is that the war is going to continue for a while, but Donald Trump is going to have to come to senses with Putin rather than escalating, which is easy to do. Putin is suggesting he can send some long-range cruise missiles that could carry nuclear warheads to Venezuela in order for Venezuela to protect itself against an American attack. At the same time, Zelensky's asking for these Tomahawk cruise missiles, which also could be nuclear, configured for nuclear war, to allow Ukraine to strike deep into Russia. Now, if this happens, it's going to be a serious escalation of the war and make it much more difficult to stop. We've covered a lot of territory today. Today, it's Friday. It's November 7th. Things do look grim today. With Mamdani, it's especially disheartening. But what I want to say is that in the end, God always wins, and God will win here too. And so therefore, let's be of good cheer and realize that if we continue to fight the battle and get down on our knees, according to 2 Chronicles 7:14, and ask God's forgiveness and repent over what we've done to allow God take it out of our schools, our lives, our cities, our public squares, our hearts. Let's put God back in the central place where God belongs. And if we do so, God will hear our prayer and heal our land. Dr. Jerome Corsi, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week on CorsiNation.com. Please spread the word. We're doing these programs every weekday. Thank you for joining us. God bless.